I wake up at 5:45 now. Same time every morning, whether I need to or not. My body forgot how to sleep in somewhere around the second year of the divorce. The second year after Linda left. But no, that is not where this story starts. That is not even close to the beginning. I am 71 years old. My hands hurt when it rains. My knees crack when I stand up from the toilet. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Columbus, Ohio. The apartment complex is called Oakwood Villas, which is funny because there are no oaks here, and nothing about this place feels like a villa. It is beige carpet and a refrigerator that hums too loud, and a sliding glass door that leads to a concrete patio where I keep one plastic chair and a dead potted plant my youngest granddaughter gave me 3 years ago. I used to live in a house, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a 2-car garage with a basketball hoop mounted above the door, a lawn I mowed every Saturday morning while drinking coffee from a thermos, a garden Linda planted every spring with tomatoes and basil and those little purple flowers she could never remember the name of. That house was mine for 23 years. I paid the mortgage. I replaced the water heater. I painted the shutters white. I built the deck in the backyard with my own hands, and my son Mark held the level for me when he was 12 years old, and we listened to the Reds game on a little radio sitting on the cooler. That house is gone now. It belongs to Mark and his wife Rachel. They bought it from me for a price that felt like family, but turned out to be a knife in the ribs. But again, I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start on a Tuesday. A normal Tuesday in October. The leaves were turning, but not falling yet. I was 70 years old, healthy enough, still driving my 2016 Ford F-150, still eating eggs for breakfast even though Linda always said my cholesterol would kill me, still working part-time at the hardware store because I did not know what else to do with my hands. That Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 7:30. It was my daughter, Amy. Amy is 43. She has my mother's eyes. Blue, green, sharp. She was my firstborn. I remember holding her in the hospital room and feeling something shift inside my chest, like a lock clicking open. Like, oh, this is why people live. This is the whole point. I coached her soccer team when she was 8. I taught her how to change a tire when she was 16. I walked her down the aisle at her wedding, and I only cried a little, and she squeezed my arm and whispered, "You are embarrassing me, Dad." And I laughed and said, "That is literally my job." That Tuesday, she called and said, "Hey, Dad, what are you doing this weekend?" I said, "Nothing," which was true. She said, "We are going to that new Italian place downtown, the one with the wood-fired pizza. You should come. The whole family will be there. Mark and Rachel, the kids, Grandma Linda."
She said Grandma Linda, like it was nothing. Like the woman who left me after 38 years of marriage was just another person coming to dinner. Like I was supposed to sit across a table from her and pass the bread and ask about her garden. Like she had not looked me in the eyes 3 years ago and said, "I love you, but I am not in love with you anymore, and I need to find myself. And by the way, I have been seeing someone. Someone. A man named Doug, who sold insurance and wore cargo shorts in winter and had a mustache like a 1970s porn star. She met him at a yoga class. Yoga. Linda never did yoga. She said it was for women who owned too many crystals. But then she started going to a studio near her work, and then she started talking about this very kind man who helped her with her downward dog, and I should have seen it then. I should have seen everything then. But I did not. I said, "Sure, honey, I would love to come to dinner." That was my first mistake. Or maybe my 500th mistake. Hard to tell anymore. The week between that phone call and the dinner was ordinary. I went to work, I stocked shelves, I helped a young dad find the right size PVC pipe for a project he was building with his son. I watched them leave the store together, and I stood in the paint aisle for a minute just breathing. Saturday came. I put on my good jeans, the ones without the paint stain on the left knee. I wore a dark blue button-down that Linda bought me 10 years ago. It still fit.
I combed my hair. I looked in the mirror and saw my father looking back at me. Same tired eyes. Same loose skin under the chin. Same look of a man who spent his whole life doing the right thing and ended up alone anyway. The restaurant was loud. That was the first thing I noticed. Not cozy loud, but hard loud. Tile floors and high ceilings and music that made you lean in to hear the person next to you. I walked in and saw them at a long table in the back. Mark, Rachel, Amy, her husband Paul, Linda, 4 grandchildren, Maya, who was 14, Leo, who was 11, Caleb, who was 8, and little Grace, who was 5, and still believed that I could fix anything with my hands. Linda was sitting at the opposite end of the table from where I was placed. Amy had arranged that. She said it was because of the seating chart, but I knew what she was doing. She was managing us like children. Keep Dad at one end and Mom at the other. No eye contact, no accidental hand touches over the breadbasket. Just 2 old people who used to share a bed and a mortgage and a life, now separated by 14 feet of white tablecloth and a candle. Mark stood up when he saw me. He hugged me. His shoulder felt hard and distant. He had started lifting weights after Rachel said he was getting soft. He smelled like expensive cologne, the kind I could never afford. He said, "Good to see you, Dad," and then he turned back to his phone before I could answer. Rachel smiled at me from her chair.
That tight smile she always gives me. The one that says, "I am being polite, but I am also keeping score." Amy kissed my cheek. She smelled like vanilla. She always smelled like vanilla. She pulled out my chair and put a hand on my shoulder and said, "I ordered you a glass of Cabernet, your favorite." And I thought, okay, maybe this will be fine. Maybe this is just a family dinner. The wine came. It was good, deep, dark, warm in my chest. I started to relax. Leo showed me a video on his phone of a dog riding a skateboard. Caleb asked me if I still had the model train set in my basement. I said I did. He said, "Can I come see it?" I said, "Anytime, buddy, anytime you want." And for a moment, I felt like the old me, the grandfather who had a purpose, the man who was needed. Then the pizza came. 4 pies, margarita, pepperoni, white with spinach, one with sausage and peppers that Mark ordered because he said it was his favorite. We passed plates, we poured more wine. Amy told a story about her neighbor who backed his truck into his own mailbox. Rachel laughed too loud. Paul made a joke about the Browns that no one understood. It was normal. It was almost happy. Linda did not look at me once. Not once. She talked to Maya about school. She talked to Rachel about some book they both read. She laughed at something Mark said, but her eyes never came to my end of the table. I watched her hands. She wore rings on her fingers, rings I had given her, anniversary rings, birthday rings. A diamond that cost me 2 months of overtime when we were young and broke and in love. She still wore them. That surprised me. I thought Doug would have bought her new ones by now. Shiny ones that did not come from a man who fell asleep on the couch at 9:30 every night. Halfway through the meal, Maya dropped her fork. It clattered on the floor, and she ducked under the table to grab it. And in that moment of silence, that small gap between conversations, I heard something I was not supposed to hear. Rachel leaned across the table and whispered to Amy. She did not know I could hear. The restaurant was loud, but Rachel has that kind of voice. High, piercing. It cuts through noise like a knife. She said, "Did you remind him?" Amy whispered back, "I will handle it." Rachel said, "I am not paying for his meal again. Last time he ordered steak and it was $40. Amy said, "I said I will handle it." Then they both sat back and smiled like nothing had happened. Rachel reached for her wine. Amy folded her napkin. And I sat there with a piece of margarita pizza halfway to my mouth and felt something cold move through my stomach. Again, this was not the first time. I had noticed things before. Little things. The way Mark always handed the check to me when we went out. The way Amy would say, "Oh, let Dad get it. He loves treating us." The way Rachel would order the most expensive thing on the menu and then ask for dessert and then thank me like I had offered. But I never minded. I was their father, their grandfather. I had money. Not a lot, but enough. I worked for 47 years. I saved. I invested. I lived below my means. I wanted them to have nice things. I wanted to give them what my father never gave me. Warmth, generosity, the feeling of being taken care of. But that whisper, that "I am not paying for his meal again," that changed something. It was not about money. It was about the way she said his, like I was not family, like I was a stray dog they had to feed. I finished my pizza. I drank another glass of wine. I watched Maya show Linda something on her phone.
I watched Mark and Paul argue about football. I watched little Grace fall asleep in her mother's lap with her thumb in her mouth. And I thought about all the times I had paid, all the meals, all the birthday presents, all the Christmas mornings where I handed out envelopes with cash inside, all the times Mark came to me and said, "Dad, the transmission went out," or "Dad, we need a down payment," or "Dad, Rachel wants to take the kids to Disney World." And I said, "Of course. Here is the money. Do not worry about it. You are my son." The check came. The server put it in the middle of the table, a black leather folder. And for 30 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody reached for it. Amy looked at Mark. Mark looked at Rachel. Rachel looked at her phone. Paul stared at the ceiling like he was calculating the trajectory of a fly. And Linda just smiled and wiped Grace's mouth with a napkin. I reached for the check. I always reached for the check, but this time I watched their faces as I did it. Mark exhaled, a small breath of relief. Rachel's shoulders dropped. Amy gave me a soft smile, a practiced smile, a smile that said, "Thank you, Dad. You are so generous." I opened the folder. $327, plus tip. Almost $400 for a dinner I did not ask for, a dinner they invited me to, a dinner where they sat me at the end of the table like an afterthought and then waited for me to pay for all of it. I pulled out my credit card. I put it in the folder. I handed it to the server, and no one said thank you. Not one person. Mark asked if anyone wanted dessert. Rachel said she could go for tiramisu. Amy said, "Dad, you love tiramisu." And I said, "Sure, honey, whatever you want." That was the night. That was the dinner. But that was not the betrayal. That was just the cut, the small cut that comes before the wound that kills you. The real thing came later. 2 months later, December. Cold, gray. The kind of Ohio winter that makes you forget the sun ever existed. I was home on a Wednesday night, watching a Western, eating soup from a can because cooking for one person felt pointless. My phone rang. It was Mark. He said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." His voice was strange, flat, not his usual voice. His usual voice had energy. He talked fast. He laughed loud. This voice was quiet, like he was reading from a script. I said, "What is it?" He said, "Can I come over?" I said, "Of course. You never have to ask." He came to my apartment, Oakwood Villas, beige carpet and humming refrigerator. He stood in my doorway and looked around like he had never seen it before. He had seen it plenty of times. He helped me move in after the divorce. He carried the boxes. He hung my television on the wall. But tonight, he looked at the place like a stranger, like he was taking inventory. He sat on my couch. I sat in my recliner. I offered him a beer. He said no. I offered him coffee. He said no. He just sat there with his hands between his knees, staring at the floor. I said, "Mark, what is going on?" He said, "Dad, I am going to be honest with you." And when a person says that, when they say, "I am going to be honest with you," it means they have not been honest before. It means the words that come next are going to change something. It means you should brace yourself. He said, "Rachel and I have been talking, and we think it is time for you to go into assisted living." I laughed. I actually laughed. I said, "Mark, I am 70 years old. I can still bench press 150 pounds. I work 40 hours a week. I drive myself everywhere. I do not need assisted living." He said, "You are getting older. You live alone. Your knees are dead. Mom is worried about you." Linda, of course, Linda was involved. Linda who had not spoken to me in 6 months. Linda who left me for a man in cargo shorts. Linda who was worried about me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I said, "I am not going into assisted living. End of discussion." Mark nodded. He stood up. He walked to my door. And then he turned around and said something that I still replay in my head every single night before I fall asleep. He said, "Dad, you do not have a choice. The house, the one you sold us, we are going to sell it, and we are using the money to pay for your care, whether you want it or not." I said, "What house?" He said, "Your house, the one we bought from you, the one you gave us for less than half of what it was worth because you said you wanted to help us, because you said family takes care of family." I said, "I did not give you that house. I sold it to you. There was a contract. There were papers."
Mark smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who had already won. He said, "Dad, you signed a power of attorney. Remember, after your heart scare last year, you were scared. You said you wanted someone to handle things in case something happened to you. You said you trusted me." I remembered. I remembered sitting in the hospital bed, the fluorescent lights, the beeping machines, Mark standing over me with a stack of papers, saying, "It is just in case, Dad, in case you get worse, in case you cannot make decisions. It is just paperwork. It is just to protect you." I signed it. I did not read it. I trusted him. He said, "The power of attorney gives me control over your finances, including the sale of the house."
We bought it from you, but the money from that sale belongs to you, and I am going to use it to put you in a facility, a good one. You will be comfortable. I said, "You cannot do that." He said, "I already did." And then he left. He walked out of my apartment, did not say goodbye, did not hug me, did not look back, just walked out into the cold December night and drove away in his truck. The truck I helped him buy, the down payment I gave him, the truck he drove to my apartment to tell me that he was taking everything I had left. I sat in my recliner for a long time. The Western was still playing. John Wayne was saying something about justice. I turned it off. The silence was huge, bigger than the room, bigger than the building, bigger than the whole city of Columbus. I called Amy. She did not answer. I called her again. She did not answer. I sent her a text. It said, "Your brother just told me he is taking my money and putting me in a home. Please call me." She texted back 30 minutes later. She said, "Dad, Mark knows what is best. You need more help than you think. We all talked about it. Mom agreed." Mom agreed. Linda, the woman who left me, the woman who said, "I love you, but I am not in love with you anymore." She agreed to put me in a home. She agreed to take my house, my money, my dignity. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark and stared at the wall. I thought about Mark when he was 5 years old. He had a fever of 104. I sat up all night with him on my chest. I sang him songs. I put cold washcloths on his forehead. I was so scared I thought I would throw up. And when the fever broke at 4 in the morning, he opened his eyes and looked at me and said, "I love you, Daddy." And I cried. I cried like a baby because I had never felt love like that before. I would have died for that boy. I would have taken a bullet. I would have given him both my kidneys and my heart and every drop of blood in my body. And now that boy was going to put me in a home. He was going to take my house. He was going to take my money. And he was going to do it with a smile, with the same smile he had when he was 5 years old. The same smile, but different. Empty now, hollow. A smile that had forgotten what love meant. The next morning, I called a lawyer, a woman named Patricia. She was young, maybe 35. She had sharp eyes and a voice that did not apologize for anything. I told her the whole story, the house, the power of attorney, the dinner, the whispers, the way my family had been picking me clean for years while I smiled and paid and thanked them for letting me be useful. Patricia listened. She took notes. She asked questions. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said, "Mr. Hendricks, do you have copies of the documents you signed?" I said no. She said, "Do you know where the original power of attorney is filed?" I said, "Mark has it. He said he would keep it safe." She leaned back in her chair. She put her pen down. She said, "Mr. Hendricks, I am going to be honest with you. If your son has control of those documents, and if he has been managing your finances without your knowledge, it could take months to untangle. It could cost you everything you have left. And even then, even if we win, you might not get the house back." I said, "How much?" She told me, $5,000 for a retainer, $10,000 more if it went to court, plus fees, plus court costs, plus expert witnesses if we needed them. I had the money, barely. It would eat most of my savings, most of what I had left after years of paying for weddings and cars and Disney World and Christmas mornings. but I did not have a choice. I wrote her a check. My hand was shaking. She took it and said, "Do not talk to your son. Do not talk to your daughter. Do not talk to your ex-wife. Let me handle it." I agreed. I went home. I sat in my recliner. I watched the sun go down over the parking lot, and I thought about the word family. What does it mean? Is it blood? Is it love? Is it obligation? Or is it just a word we use to make ourselves feel safe, while the people closest to us sharpen their knives? The legal fight lasted 8 months. 8 months of phone calls, 8 months of emails, 8 months of Patricia telling me to be patient while Mark's lawyer filed motion after motion. 8 months of Amy sending me texts that said things like, "Dad, just sign the papers and we can all move on." 8 months of Rachel posting pictures on Facebook of their family vacations, their new furniture, their new car, all bought with money that should have been mine. I went to court twice. The first time I sat on a wooden bench and watched Mark walk in with Rachel and Linda and Amy and Paul, the whole family, on his side. They sat together on the opposite side of the room. They whispered to each other. They laughed at something Paul said. They looked like a family, a real family. And I sat alone with my lawyer and felt like an intruder in my own life. The judge was a woman named Carter. She was about my age, gray hair, reading glasses on a chain. She looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from seeing too many families tear each other apart over money. She asked questions. She looked at documents. She told Mark to provide a full accounting of every dollar he had spent from my accounts since the power of attorney was signed. Mark turned white. Rachel stopped smiling. The second court date was 3 months later. Mark brought a box of documents, bank statements, receipts, spreadsheets. Patricia went through them line by line, and what she found made me want to throw up. Mark had been taking money from me for 2 years. Small amounts at first, $100 here, $200 there, withdrawals marked as groceries or medical expenses or home maintenance. But then the amounts got bigger. $5,000 for a new roof on his house, $12,000 for a vacation to Florida, $23,000 for something called family emergency that turned out to be a down payment on Rachel's new SUV. And then the house. The house I sold him for $180,000 when it was worth almost $400,000. He had already listed it for sale, $395,000. The entire profit, every dollar above what he paid me. He was planning to keep it all and use my own money from the sale to put me in a nursing home where I would sit in a wheelchair and stare at a television and wait to die. I looked at Mark across the courtroom. He would not meet my eyes. He stared at the table. He chewed his lip. He was 41 years old, a grown man, a father, a husband, and he was stealing from his own father. The same father who taught him how to ride a bike, who held his hand when he got stitches at age 7, who sat in the bleachers at every baseball game, even when it rained, who worked double shifts for 30 years so he could have a bedroom of his own and new sneakers and a college fund. The judge ruled in my favor. She voided the power of attorney. She ordered Mark to return every dollar he had taken. She put a stop on the sale of the house. She awarded me legal fees. It was a victory, a complete victory. Patricia hugged me. The court reporter smiled at me. The bailiff shook my hand, but I did not feel like I had won. I watched my son walk out of that courtroom with his wife and his mother and his sister. They did not look at me. They walked past me like I was furniture, like I was a piece of paper on the floor, like I had never been anything to them at all. Amy called me that night. She was crying. She said, "Dad, how could you do this to us? How could you humiliate Mark like that? He is your son. He was just trying to take care of you. He made a mistake. He is sorry. But you dragged him into court. You made him look like a criminal." I said, "Amy, he was stealing from me." She said, "He was protecting you. You are old, Dad. You cannot take care of yourself anymore. We were trying to help." I said, "He took $23,000 for a down payment on an SUV."
Rachel needed a new car. The old one was not safe for the kids. I said, Amy, listen to yourself. She started crying harder. She said, you have changed. You used to be generous. You used to be kind. Now you are just bitter and angry and alone. Mom was right to leave you. That was the moment. The moment I realized I had lost my daughter too. Not in court, not in a legal fight, but in her heart, in her mind. I was not her father anymore. I was a problem, an obstacle, an old man who would not go quietly into the nursing home where they had already picked out my room. I said, Amy, I love you. She said, do you? Because it does not feel like it. She hung up. I have not spoken to her since. That was 14 months ago. She changed her number.
Or blocked mine. I am not sure which. Either way, the phone does not ring. Mark sent me a letter 6 months ago. A real letter. On paper. In an envelope. He wrote that he was sorry things had to happen the way they did. That he loved me. That he hoped we could find a way to be a family again. But then he added a postscript. He said, Rachel is pregnant. A boy. They are going to name him Mark Jr. And they have decided that I will not be allowed to meet him. Not until I get help. Not until I see a therapist. Not until I understand how my actions hurt the family. My actions. I stopped the theft of my own money. And my actions hurt the family. I wrote him back. I said, congratulations on the baby. I said, I love you. I said, I am sorry you feel that way. I said, my door is always open. I mailed the letter. I do not know if he got it. I do not know if he read it. I do not know if he threw it in the trash while Rachel watched and nodded with approval. Linda called me once. On my birthday. She said, happy birthday. Her voice was soft. The old voice. The one I fell in love with when we were both 19 years old and she wore a yellow sundress and I had hair down to my shoulders. She said, I am sorry for the way things turned out. She said, I never wanted this. She said, I still care about you. I said, Linda, why did you agree to put me in a home? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, because Mark asked me to. And he said it was the only way to keep you safe. I said, safe from what?
She said, from yourself. I said, Linda, I am going to ask you one question, and I want you to tell me the truth. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a paycheck, a house, a way to have children, and then move on when something better came along? She started crying. I could hear her breathing into the phone. She said, of course I loved you. We had 40 years. 40 years is not nothing. I said, but it was not enough. She said, nothing is ever enough. For anyone. You want to believe that love is enough. That being a good father is enough. That working hard and providing and showing up is enough. But it is not. People change. People want different things. People get tired of being grateful. That word. Grateful. She said people get tired of being grateful. And that is when I understood. She did not see me as a partner. She saw me as a benefactor. A man who gave her things. And she was tired of owing me. Tired of saying thank you. Tired of pretending that the life we built together was something she chose, instead of something she settled for. I said, goodbye, Linda. She said, please do not hang up. I said goodbye. I hung up. I have not spoken to her since. I heard from a neighbor that she moved to Florida with Doug. They bought a condo near the beach. She posts pictures on Instagram. I do not have Instagram, but my neighbor shows me sometimes. Linda in a big sun hat. Linda holding a glass of white wine. Linda smiling at the camera with her arm around a man in cargo shorts. She looks happy.
Maybe she is happy. Maybe she was never happy with me.
Maybe I was just the person who paid for the life she wanted until she found someone who could give her the same things with less obligation. I still work at the hardware store. I am 71 now. My knees are worse. My back hurts. But I like the smell of sawdust and paint. I like helping young fathers find the right tool for the right job. I like watching them leave with their sons, the boys holding their father's hands, the fathers looking tired and proud and scared. I see myself in them. I see the man I used to be. The man who believed that love was a thing you could build, like a deck, like a house, like a life. If you just put in the hours, if you just showed up every day, if you just kept your head down and your hands busy and your heart open. But love is not like that. Love is not wood and nails. Love is not a contract. Love is not a mortgage you can pay off with 30 years of loyalty. Love is a ghost. It appears when it wants. It leaves when it wants. And it does not say goodbye. I visit the house sometimes. My old house. The one I built the deck on. The one where Mark learned to ride a bike. The one where Amy scraped her knee on the driveway. And I carried her inside and put a Band-Aid on it. And kissed her forehead. And told her she was brave. I drive by slowly. The new owners painted it gray. They cut down the maple tree in the front yard. They put a trampoline in the backyard where my garden used to be.
No, Nat.
I sit in my truck across the street, and I watch the lights come on at dusk. I wonder if the people inside are happy. I wonder if they fight about money. I wonder if their children will grow up to steal from them,
Or maybe that is just something that happened to me, because I was too blind to see what was right in front of my face. My granddaughter Maya found me on Facebook last month. She sent me a message. She said, "Grandpa, I miss you." She said, "Mom said I am not supposed to talk to you, but I do not care." She said, "Can we get coffee sometime?" I wrote back. I said, "Yes." I said I would love that more than anything. I said, "Tell me when and where. I will be there." She did not write back. Maybe she got scared. Maybe her mother found out. Maybe she was just being a teenager, saying something she did not mean. I do not know. I checked my messages every day. Every single day. I open Facebook. I look at her profile. She posted a picture of herself at the mall. She is wearing a green hoodie. She is smiling with her friends. She looks happy. She looks like Amy did when she was 14, before the world made her hard, before money became more important than blood. I am going to end this here, not because I am done talking, but because there is nothing else to say. I am an old man in a beige apartment. My knees hurt. My phone does not ring. My children decided I was worth more dead than alive. Or maybe not dead, just tucked away, out of sight.
In a room with a television and a bed rail and a call button I would push, and no one would come. But I am not in that room. Not yet. I am still here, in my recliner, drinking coffee, watching the sun come up over the parking lot, waiting for a phone call that never comes, loving people who do not love me back. That is the whole story. That is the whole truth. There is no lesson. There is no redemption. There is just a man and his empty apartment and the sound of his own breathing and the question he asks himself every night before he closes his eyes. The question that has no answer. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong?